Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Olawale. I have a special guest with me today. We're going to be talking about public defenders, their role within the criminal justice system, what they do, the myth surrounding them, the fact and the importance or their non-importance within the criminal justice system. Her name is Rena Shak. She's an attorney, a public defender, and currently a candidate for judge. Welcome to the show, Rena.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for coming. It's an honor to have you. Can you please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Rena Shak. Like Emmanuel said, I'm running for Franklin County Municipal Court judge this fall. I originally come from Youngstown, Ohio, but my family comes from Greece. So I come from an immigrant family. My father and my mother's parents are all immigrants from a very small island in Greece. Some immigrated to Boston, some immigrated to Youngstown, which is where I'm from. I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, because I went to Ohio State University for undergraduate studies. And then after Ohio State University, I went to Capital University Law School for my legal studies. I have spent my entire career as far as being an attorney as a public defender. I initially started in the Ohio Public Defender's Office. I worked both in their legal departments as well as their wrongful conviction unit. And then I started my trial career about 7 going on 8 years ago now with the Franklin County Public Defender's Office. So I have been a trial attorney with that office for going on 8 years. I have represented defendants in every single type of criminal case, ranging from traffic offenses all the way up to aggravated murder. I have spent the last 5 years as a felony attorney. So right now I represent individuals who are indigent and who also are accused of having committed felonies. I love what I do. I'm excited to take my perspective as a public defender and as a child of an immigrant family, and hopefully take that perspective to the bench this November.
Thank you. Don't you find it incredible that it's been 8 years since you've been an attorney?
It has felt like a blink of an eye. Yeah.
No, I'm fail. Yeah, now let's talk about public defenders and what you do and what you guys don't do. For those who don't know who public defenders are, they are attorneys hired by the state or county to represent criminal defendants who can't afford to pay for their own attorneys. So, and because of that, public defenders they get the bad rap just because they're being paid by the state or the county. Some people believe that they don't really work hard, that they don't put as much fight to defend their clients, and sometimes they're in lockstep with the prosecutor. You know, so because of that, the public defender also they're busy trying to defend clients. They're also busy trying to defend the perception of the public. So it's like a dual role. What do you have to say to people that call you guys public pretenders?
Well, I can't say that I haven't heard it more than once, because I have. But I think what it boils down to is that a lot of people believe that if it's free, then it must not have much value attached to it. I'm here to tell you that that is completely untrue. I have been with this office for almost a decade now, and every colleague of mine is there because we want to be there. Public defenders don't make a whole lot of money as far as what you could make as an attorney, okay? And we're there because, not for the money, but we're there because we're there to help people. So every single person in my office is there to truly serve the public. I think what people might not understand sometimes is that our roles as public defenders, I like to describe as 2/3 attorney, 1/3 social worker. We have wonderful social workers who are employed by our office, but a lot of times the attorneys end up taking on the role of what you would think a social worker would take on. And by that, I mean that not only are we focused on assisting our clients to battle their cases in the legal realm. So are we going to have a motion hearing? Are we going to go to trial? Are we going to negotiate a plea deal? But in addition to that, the clients that we serve are from the most vulnerable and marginalized communities in our system. Okay, so they are the most underserved communities, meaning that they oftentimes lack resources that a lot of us take for granted. So by that I mean job stability, housing stability. Sometimes my clients are lacking food; they need food assistance, government insurance, drug and addiction treatment, mental health treatment, things like that are really prevalent in our underserved communities. We are not only helping the public to battle their legal case, but we are helping our clients reach stability outside of the courthouse by linking them with any of the resources that they're lacking. And so, our motto is, look, if I can make you as stable as possible outside of the courthouse, once we deal with your case, then hopefully you're not cycling back through the system, because we've now assisted you with that drug and alcohol treatment or the mental health counseling. Anything that you need, we're here to help. And so I understand that sometimes because we're free, people think that we're being paid for by the state. We're salaried employees. Our salaries come from the county, but by no means are we in cahoots with the prosecutor's office. Our jobs are to look out for our client's best interest, whether that be in their legal matter or whether that be, me trying to help my client get clothing for their children or clothing for themselves. And so really, we are a holistic office. We try to offer as many services to our clients as possible because these are services that they are lacking in other realms of society.
Thank you. Is there something that the Franklin County Public Defender's Office is doing to change the public perception, the negative public perception of that office in the public relation side?
I think that what we're doing is just working our hardest on our cases. I think that the best way to change the perception is by a client experiencing the services from our office and saying, wow, that was much different than I thought it was going to be. I've had so many clients call me after we have linked them with drug and alcohol assistance or mental health services or any number of the things that we've talked about. And they've called me and said, thank you so much. I've been sober for a year. I have my house back. I have my family back. I have a job. I love my job. I've been at it for so long. I can pay my bills. And so for us, I can speak for myself in particular, but I can probably say this for the rest of my office. We're not in this for the glory or for some type of reputation that precedes us. I'm not in it to walk through a courtroom and have everybody roll out a red carpet. What I'm in it for is to help my clients. I'm in it to protect their rights. I'm in it to create equity within the courtroom and to help them access direly needed resources that they are not able to access outside of it. So personally, I don't really care what our reputation is because I'm more focused on doing good work for the people that need it. And I think that that's the best way to attack any negative perception is, look, I'm giving you a quality representation. I'm giving you holistic services. I'm getting you access to things that you might not have otherwise had access to and helping you stabilize your life. And so I think that's the best way for us to go about showing the public that we're here, we care, and we are working tirelessly to make sure that you're on the best path forward.
Thank you. The criminal justice system is one of possibly the most expansive within the legal system, because when you think of how the legal system is, the criminal justice system has its own, the part it takes. A lot of people know more about it than you think of other aspects of the law. So it's one of the most important part of the legal system, In that vein, what will it be like without an office of the public defender? Can you imagine it without that office?
I can't imagine it without that office. And honestly, sometimes in court, we'll talk about what would happen if we just stopped showing up. What if we just all stopped showing up? Everything would come to a halt. And the reason that we would never do that is because Otherwise, the vulnerable communities that we serve would have absolutely no one to speak up for them. So I will caveat and say that our county does provide assistance to people who cannot afford a private attorney by way of our office. We get 3 out of every 4 cases, and then 1 out of every 4 cases is assigned to a private attorney who takes appointed cases. So I don't want to say that absolutely 0 people would have representation, because there are some private attorneys who do good work and take appointed cases. But we do represent 75% or more of indigent individuals that come through the courthouse, which is a large percentage of the actual cases that are coming through the courthouse. We run all of the arraignment courts. And so without our office, we would have, I would say a good 80%, I would imagine, of cases that are funneling through the courthouse, of people who would not have legal assistance, who would not have representation, and otherwise would not have a voice. Their rights would not be protected. They wouldn't have anybody to make sure that they were getting treated equally and fairly.
Thank you. So your office provides voice to the voiceless and the downtrodden.
Yes, sir. And that's why we're here.
Yeah, apart from being a good attorney, what are those human qualities you believe a public defender should have?
Sure. So, of course, I mean, our dockets are the heaviest of probably any type of attorney that's handling legal cases. I can tell you right now, I have well over 100 felonies on my docket alone that I'm handling at this moment. And I know our municipal units numbers are probably higher because their cases go a little bit quicker. So I think that you have to be very organized just on the practical side. You have to be able to assess your cases in a pretty quick manner. So you have to know what you're looking for. You have to be on top of things. But the more human element to our job is probably the most important, if you ask me. And it's because of what I talked about earlier. The fact that we are providing so many social services outside just legal representation. So I need to be able to have empathy for my clients. I need to be able to sit down and listen to what their stories are and listen to why they're here in the first place. I need to have a heart. I need to be caring. And I need to be passionate, because in my view, every single person that comes in front of the court system, whether they're a defendant, whether they're a victim, everybody has a story. Even civil litigants, everybody has a story, and everybody deserves to have their story and their voice presented and heard with respect, with dignity, and with equality across, no matter what your position is in the courthouse. And I think that our clients, being members of the indigent community who maybe don't otherwise have people in the system to lend credibility to their stories or to lend power to their voice, I take that as a badge of honor, that's part of my job. Is to make sure that I'm the one in the courtroom who can say, look, things are not being conducted fairly here. Or look, this person has had an incredibly traumatic life that has led them to where they are. Or judge, prosecutor, this person is suffering from a serious mental illness that they are not being able to get treated, or an addiction that they need treated that is fueling this behavior. And to do that, you can't just be legal minded. The majority of what we do is not reading case law or delving into, fancy words and big books to find legal precedent. Of course we do those things, but the majority of our jobs is really being a human, just being a friend, being a measure of support for people who otherwise don't have that outside of our office.
Thank you. You mentioned that currently you have over 100 felonies as a caseload.
Yes.
That's one of the concerns that people have about the public defender's office. There's this belief that because one public defender may carry so much caseload that they might be unable to be able to give a particular case the kind of attention that it deserves. So as a result, there's less likelihood that they might seek to get a plea bargain instead of really investigating or really taking the case to trial. What do you have to say to people about those kind of concerns?
Sure. I think those concerns are valid. I think that when you think about numbers, of course, me having 100 cases versus me having 10 cases is going to divide my time up. But I also think maybe what people don't think about is just because another attorney may have 10 cases does not mean that they are giving those cases more attention. So that would be the first thing that I would say, is that it's attorney by attorney. I think there are some public defenders with 100+ cases that are providing more attention to their cases than maybe some other attorneys are who have less numbers. I don't think just because you have higher or lower numbers equates to the amount of attention you're providing to your cases. I would also say that in our job, like I said, we have to develop incredible organization skills, and we have to be finely tuned as to what we're looking for in our cases. So when I'm going over discovery, my eyes are darting towards, are there any issues in this case that would lead me down to a path of a motion hearing? Are there any issues in this case that we think might lead us down the path to trial? Are there any issues in this case, such as lack of resources, that we may be able to address in continuing down the path of a negotiated plea? So we are really good at being able to spot those issues right out of the gate. And I can tell you, everybody in my office, as soon as we get discovery on our cases, we are down to see our clients to review that discovery with our clients. Because we have such a high caseload, sometimes that means that I'm not able to just go down and chat with my clients just to chat with them. That is something that you might not get with someone in a public defender's office, because we're busy visiting other people and going over discovery with other people. But what I can tell you is that our clients are not lacking in any of the crucial moments that are required and necessary in order to provide quality legal representation. Our office is beyond compelled and to provide the best legal representation that we can. And so we're always at the jail. I'm there almost weekly. Before COVID, it was probably a lot more than that, because we could make quick trips in and out. If you look at the logs on the jail records, you'll see that probably every other one is somebody from our office visiting our clients. So I can absolutely understand and appreciate the concern, but I can assure you that there are no crucial steps being left out when it comes to being represented by a public defender.
You're there when you need to be there. You show up when you need it. As a public defender, what kind of cases have you handled personally up to, well, maybe trial? And what are those cases that stands out that you would like to share?
So I've handled every type of case, from, like I said, from traffic cases all the way up to aggravated murder. Right now, pretty much everybody in our office that is a more senior staff member in the felony division has multiple murders on our caseload. So we're handling multiple murders at a time. We're handling multiple cases that are facing life in prison, very serious, heavy offenses. But we're also handling a lot of felony 4s and felony 5s, to where we can provide those social services that I talked about and hopefully divert people from the criminal justice system. Personally, I have had trials that include guns, so weapons trials in the felony court. I have won those trials. I've also had multiple motion hearings, and those have ranged from motions to suppress, motion to dismiss. Those have been on a number of different ranges of charges and things of that nature. One in particular that I thought was actually fairly interesting was a very involved motion hearing where we were asserting that the federal DEA did an interview of our client who was accused of trafficking drugs. And because that person was a non-English speaker, they used a language line translator to conduct that interview. And so what we did was we hired, with our own funding, we hired a separate interpreter who spoke that particular language to review that interview and write out a transcript. It was like a 100-page transcript of this interview, translating exactly what was said to my client and what the response was. And from that, we were able to make the arguments that our client didn't understand exactly what questions were being asked of him, maybe didn't understand his rights in what he was giving up in giving that interview. So personally, in my practice, I like to take a lot of creative approach when it comes to motion hearings or trials. That's never something that we shy away from. kind of circling back to your question before, where you said some people have the concern that maybe our docket leads to higher rates of pleas than trials, and that ratio seems to be higher on one side than the other. What I always point out to people is that it's going to be higher because we have much higher caseloads than everybody else. And so I think if you pare down the ratios, they're probably pretty similar between attorneys in our office and other attorneys. But I would also point out to everybody that, again, our clients are usually lacking life resources. My client, if he can't pay $20,000, $30,000 for a private attorney to represent him, that most likely also means that he can't pay his bail to get out of jail while he's waiting for his trial. Or if he is out of jail but still cannot pay for a private attorney, that also likely to me means that he's working a low wage job if he is employed. Those jobs don't come with paid time off, vacation time, sick time that you can just take to come to court. And so there have absolutely been cases that I have had where I am begging my clients to go to trial or begging my clients to have a motion hearing because I think that the case is perfect for that. But my clients, in a lot of those instances, are saying, look, I'm being offered probation. That's just what I want to take because I can't afford to keep sitting in jail, and I can't afford my bond to wait for a year before my trial comes. Or if I am out, I'm working a job that is going to fire me if I have to keep taking off of work to come to court before my trial date. And so that is something that is very real to the clients that we serve. And it is not my job to choose for them, unfortunately. I am the facilitator of whichever path my client wants to go down. I'm just the person that presents the options and presents my opinion. And so I think that the public maybe sometimes doesn't realize those very real life barriers that the clients we serve have towards going to trial or going to motion hearing. Their lives, they don't have transportation. They don't have jobs that will allow them to come back and forth from the courthouse. And so continually having to do that is almost more of a burden than just pleading guilty and being put on probation and having it done. So that's what I would have to say in that respect.
Yeah, thank you. And talking about bond, I had this conversation with one of the judges of the Supreme Court, of the Municipal Court last month on this same show. Bond itself has become a controversial issue because when it comes to how judges set bond and as to the defendant's ability to pay bond, and invariably it affects the outcome of the case because you find out that, for instance, a very poor person, even if their bond is only $25,000, if they have no one to post bond for them and you are being locked up, your trial days is in maybe 60 days or 90 days or what have you, the chances of you saying, you know what, I'll just take a plea deal for time served, even though you haven't done anything, is higher than someone who is able to post bond. I know that's not your role as a public defender because the only thing that you can do will be maybe to plead with the court to set a lower bond, or maybe the prosecutor will agree to that. So you can't really do that. But I would like you to, what do you think about a situation like that, where a defendant is being, have no leverage?
I mean, it's very real. Like you said, it's very real. I think the ACLU of Ohio just released a follow-up to a study that they did. And if I'm not mistaken, what they said was that in particular in the Franklin County Municipal Court, once a defendant has spent, I believe they said, and I'll correct it if I'm wrong in a follow-up, but I believe they said once they have spent over 4 days in jail, the likelihood of them being convicted of something related to that offense goes up 40%. As opposed to somebody who is being released and not held in incarceration. I can tell you that that's probably higher with felonies because you're in for longer periods of time. Your trial date might not come for a year. You may have status dates, but you may not actually be going to trial for a year or more, especially now with COVID. And so that's something that is very real. I have clients who are being held in maybe on an initial bond that was set for $2,000 that they can't make. And so like you said, our role is to find those cases and to present to the judge why we think these people should be given recognizance bonds or reporting recognizance bonds so that they can get out and fight the case and live their life while they're fighting the case. Studies show that people who are given that opportunity have more success in the outcomes of their case because they have the privilege of being able to still live their life, still be there for their family, still be employed, things of that nature. You're making more productive citizens who are contributing to society while they're waiting for the result of their case than otherwise. I would also note that this is something that I echo to everybody. This is why it is so important to pay attention to the people who are running for your local courts, because those are the judges, in particular in Franklin County Municipal Court, those are the judges that are setting your bonds when you are initially charged on both misdemeanors and felonies, and then continuing with those misdemeanor cases. Once somebody is indicted with a felony, of course, their bond gets transferred over to felony court, and then those judges are responsible. But that's why you need to pay attention to who is getting on the bench, because those philosophies translate, and they are very real life-changing consequences with somebody who understands the collateral consequences of bond being set or for further incarceration, as opposed to somebody who may not understand that. I also echo to everybody that, as a public defender, I'm very well aware of the fact that there's collateral consequences to incarceration. That doesn't mean that there aren't some cases that require incarceration. We know that, okay? However, the amount of cases that probably do not require incarceration is much larger than what we are seeing. And we know that bonds are pretty unequal with regard to race relations, okay? We know that a Black man and a white man who have similar records and are charged with similar crimes, the Black man is probably more likely to get a monetary bond attached to his case. And if both get monetary bonds, the bond of the Black individual is probably going to be $9,000 to $10,000 higher than that of the white individual. And I believe that comes from ACLU studies as well. Those numbers continue on and on. And so you also have to look, in addition to when you're setting bond, to being able to check your own biases, because we know every single person comes to every experience with their own biases. So being able to be aware of these inequities in our system with things like bond make you more able to check your own biases that you might be bringing to the table and really think about, hey, is what's happening here fair? Is what's happening here what needs to be happening, or are we just going with the status quo? I will also say that we know that once somebody's incarcerated for more than 3 to 7 days, a lot of their government insurance for themselves and their families lapse. Once they're incarcerated for, I believe it's over 30 days, then their disability lapses. And that is life-changing for somebody who is incarcerated because they cannot pay their bond, and now their entire family is impacted in ways that most judges might not think about. And so I think the bond and the bail conversation has so many components to it that people might not realize, including those collateral consequences. So when you're setting bond as a judge, you really have to be thinking of all of that in order to come up with the appropriate number.
Thank you. And thank you.
Sorry, I'm long-winded.
Okay. Does your office have a kind of productivity expectation?
What do you mean by productivity expectation?
There's some offices, like, let's say, for instance, you work for a big law firm, they expect you to bill a certain hours a year. Some expect you to close out as many, maybe 30 cases a month. Is there any kind of expectation within your office?
Not within our office. Our office, we keep getting cases, and that's never going to stop. As long as the cases are coming in, we're going to keep getting them. I will say that the Supreme Court gives the judges directives that certain cases should be resolved within like a 6-month time frame. And so sometimes from the court, we face some pressure, both us and the state, to get a case resolved, whether we're going to set it for trial or resolve it in a plea deal. But really, there's no productivity. Our clients are people. We're not billing for their time. We're not charging for their time. So whatever it takes to get the best result possible is what we're held to.
Thank you. You said something just a few minutes ago, and when you were answering that question, you said something about people's philosophy and how that affects the way they rule on cases when they get to become judges, even as attorneys. That also happens through the way you see cases or the way you defend or prosecute cases. So for judicial candidates, most voters don't have a chance to question them or to really know what their philosophies are. How can people educate themselves to find out how a potential judge will rule, or what kind of philosophies that they have? Because really, a judge is made up, their philosophy is made up out of the rule. Not that people don't change or grow over time, but you have to be willing and be aware, and to be able to do that. So what do you want to tell voters who are thinking, how do I know what this candidate believes?
Sure. So as judicial candidates, we're bound by the code of ethics on speaking about partisan issues. Okay. So voters shouldn't know how I feel on partisan issues, let's say like abortion or certain, those hot button issues. Anything that can come before the court, we are not to speak on as far as what our personal stance is. But what I will say is that the best way to get to know your judicial candidates is to look at their background, look them up. Okay. Look at their websites, look at their biographies that you've seen, just Google them and see what they're involved with. What are they volunteering with? What are they spending their time doing? Where do they come from? What's their background? So for me, I come from an immigrant family. I come from a lot of perseverance and struggle and stories of just humble beginnings. And that has really fueled my drive to become a public defender and give back to the community. And then, what I do as a public defender and what I'm doing in my side time during my life in my volunteering work. I think those are all very important things that people should know about their judicial candidates. And that's something that you should absolutely be paying attention to. I will say, as a judicial candidate, obviously our jobs is to follow the law. So whatever the law says is the way that we should rule. But you're right that everybody brings their own personal experiences to every current and future experience that they're going to have. And so you should really know where your candidates are coming from before you vote for them.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, does the public defender's office, do you guys have funds set aside for investigation, forensic analyses, and the hiring of experts?
Absolutely. We, at least in the Franklin County Public Defender's Office, are incredibly blessed to have the amount of funding that we do for those collateral services. So we have a full investigative staff. We have a full social work staff who help our clients and are assigned to our cases. If I need something investigated, I just type up a little memo and send it to our wonderful investigators, and they're on it. We also have other funding for things that people may not think of. So, for example, I have a particular case pending right now that our office is going to be paying multiple thousands of dollars to get this person a psychiatric evaluation so that we can present to the court with regard to mitigation for their case, to explain a little bit about what's going on psychiatrically with that person. Or our office pays for third-party interpreters to go to the jail with us so that we can speak with our clients. We have pretty much whatever we need, our office gives to us so that we can provide for our clients in any way.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever encountered a client who doesn't want your representation because you're from the public defender's office?
I have, and it comes back to those myths and those stories. People think that if you're free, that you must not be very good or you must not hold a lot of value. But I will tell you that after completing representation with those clients, they have always said, "Man, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Thank you for the work that you do. I apologize." So I don't blame anybody for having those opinions because they're there and what are you going to do? But my goal is to change that opinion by the representation I provide.
Great. How did you handle the initial rejection?
It is what it is. I always say, look, I don't take anything personally because this is the worst days of our clients' lives. Okay. These are the most frustrating days. These are the scariest days. And so I want them to be able to tell me what they're thinking, whether they have an issue with the way that I'm approaching a case, the way that maybe their personality and my personality doesn't mesh. in my opinion, my clients deserve to have an attorney that they feel absolutely comfortable with. And sometimes if that's not me, because of, we have different philosophies or we have different ways of doing things, I'm never personally offended by that. All I know is that I'm doing the best job I can, but I'm not the one on the other side of the table. I'm not the one facing those dire consequences. And so I want them to feel the most comfortable that they can.
Thanks. You've always been interested in criminal law, even since law school.
Yes.
What inspired that love?
I think the public service aspect of it is really what I would have to say. Obviously, I mean, I grew up like everybody else watching Law and Order, and those shows are just so so compelling. I will tell you that real life criminal law is not like that, is from what I've learned. But what I'll tell you is the beginning is I started in a criminal defense firm in law school, and I was like, oh, I probably want to go more like prosecution. But then I started there to get the real world experience in defense, and I fell in love with it. The part of criminal defense where you are the voice for somebody who doesn't otherwise have that, you're standing up for the rights of somebody who can get easily trampled on if you weren't the one to be there as the gatekeeper. We look at our jobs as not only providing the public service aspect to it, but my job is to protect constitutional rights. And if we're not there every day to make sure that the system is being held accountable to their standard of proof and their standard of operating, then there's no telling what rights could be getting railroaded if we weren't there holding the other side and the courts to those high standards. And so really, I take my role as an advocate very seriously. I take my role as somebody who is creating equity in the courts and protecting constitutional rights very seriously. But I also take my role as somebody who's helping my clients access drug treatment and food and housing very seriously. And so we have a lot of facets to what we do, and I'm just honored to be doing it.
Mhm. Like you said, you're more like a social worker and an attorney. You get two in one.
Yep.
And working as a public defender, it's a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is not just in your personal lives. You sacrifice when it comes to remuneration, salary. You don't get paid as much as private attorneys or attorneys that work for other offices. And also when it comes to being appreciated, and even knowing all that, you still decided that you want to work as a public defender. For someone who graduated college in 3 years, a very smart woman, what inspired that love to just sacrifice it all to stand for those who can afford to pay an attorney?
So, like I said before, really it goes back to my family history for me personally. My family came over from Greece, did not know any English, and relied heavily on the kindness of others and public services to help them navigate their way and to be successful in this country. And my dad, who was a small child when he came over from Greece, always has instilled in us that sense of community, that sense of servitude, and that sense of giving back. And so my love for what I do is fueled in that backstory that's in my DNA from my family very recently coming over from a different country and facing a ton of hardships, both sides of my families, in persevering and just really having that sense of community in the attitude that it was the kindness of others helping them navigate this new world that really helped them to work as hard as they did and to be as successful as they were. And so my attitude taking from that is, look, I now, because of the hard work of my family and the grace of others, am in the position to be privileged enough to pass that on to other people who might be needing those same resources and that same kindness. So that's why I do what I do. That's why I continue to do what I do. I don't need, a pat on the back. Like I said, I don't need the notoriety of anything. Really, what I do is when my clients can call me and thank me because they're sober, or thank me because we got them the trauma-informed treatment that they needed, and so they're successful and they're not coming back to court. That to me is worth every bit of stress, frustration. And I think that would be echoed, across the board in our office. Like you said, we are very blessed in the Franklin County Public Defender's Office, but we don't make as much as the prosecutors on average. We don't make as much as other attorneys do on average. We're there because we care, because we want to give back. And those calls of success are, unlike unlike anything else. And so that's what fuels us, and that's what fuels me personally.
So you're riding on the legacy of sacrifice and service inspired by the people before you.
Yes, sir. My dad ended up being a teacher and has always given back in ways of volunteerism. And so I feel like it's my my homage to my father, my mother, my ancestors that worked so hard so that I could live a life of being able to then give back to others.
I'm sure they're proud of you.
I hope so.
Yeah, you worked as a law clerk at the public defender's office and the wrongful conviction unit.
The Ohio Public Defender's Office.
The wrongful conviction unit.
Mm-hmm.
While you were working there, was there any case that was litigated successfully and someone who was wrongfully convicted was exonerated?
I don't think while I was there they were getting any results in particular, but I know we had many cases that we were working on, and some of the cases that we did work on while I was there ended up having very successful outcomes in the year 2 or 3 after that. So they are doing phenomenal work. They have exonerated so many people. They've renegotiated sentences from life sentences down to sentences of time served because of questioning evidence. And so, offices like that are doing so much to bring attention to the fact that sometimes our system fails and sometimes we're getting it wrong. And it is worth looking into every aspect of that.
Thank you. And Tola says they're proud of you.
That's an aunt.
So what does it feel like to represent clients who have their lives, on hold, their freedom, and sometimes even their lives literally, because maybe they might be facing the death penalty?
Mm-hmm.
What does it feel to have those responsibilities of you being in between losing their freedom and, of course, not just you, but they expect you to be the advocate to set them free?
It's very stressful. I'll tell you that. It's, that the importance of that is not lost on any of us. Sometimes we come back from court and we are in tears because of the results of a case. Sometimes we come back from court and we are just so emotionally drained or so stressed out because we want to be able to provide the best representation that we can for somebody. I will tell you that there have been so many cases, more than I can even count, where I haven't slept at night because it's the night before a big sentencing on a case where I know that a young individual could be facing either probation or 8 years in prison. And the difference in the sentence there is just, obviously completely life altering. And so the responsibility of that really does weigh on you. But like I said, the people in our office are there because we feel the sense of responsibility in doing that to the best of our ability so that our clients have the best chance of the best outcomes.
Thank you. And, what do you do to get rid of those stress when you're under such stress? Maybe you even have 1 or 2 clients facing lengthy jail time. And sometimes, as an attorney, an attorney who has never lost a case has never tried many. You
Right.
can win all your cases you litigate and just, So if an attorney says, "Oh, I've never lost a case," they've only tried 1 or 2 cases. So how do you handle the feeling of loss when you're not successful in a case, which happens to every attorney?
Yes, it is hard. And I will say that the definition of loss and win in a criminal case in particular is very vast. So it's not just a lose or a win in the traditional sense where you're going to trial and it's either guilty or not guilty. Of course, those losses are devastating, especially when you think you had a case that was winnable and that you have a client who might be innocent. But also wins and losses come in, man, I thought my client was getting probation and something happened and the judge sentenced them to prison. Or, man, I thought we agreed and I made the best case for my client to get 6 months incarceration and now something happened and they're going away for 4 years. Just things of that nature are wins and are losses. Those can weigh equally as heavily on you as a guilty or a not guilty, because you are the one that is really guiding your client. You're telling them, look, this is my opinion here. This is what we think could happen. And then it's up to you to try to convince the court to make that happen. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It's incredibly stressful. You come home, you yell about it, you cry about it, you complain about it. You do whatever you have to do, whether it's exercising or, for me, it's hanging out with my 2-year-old, because family time is something that gets your mind out of those negative feelings and really just puts you in the moment and makes you realize how blessed you are. And it's about resetting and then getting back on the horse the next day, because you don't have time to waste in sorrow or wallowing in sadness, because you have another client whose life is on the line tomorrow. And so you got to get back up on that horse and you got to get back up to 100% the next day.
Great. What advice would you have to maybe someone in college or maybe someone in high school or even a law student or a new attorney who is aspiring to become a criminal defense attorney?
I would say shadow somebody. Our office is always willing to have people shadow us. We've, probably once a month we have somebody in our office shadowing. I don't think you need to get an actual internship somewhere to really learn about it. I think that's a good way to do it. But if you're interested, reach out to a professional. Just, email me, email somebody in our office, and we're happy to connect you to really make sure, because if you're not getting those firsthand experiences, you're really not understanding what you're getting yourself into.
Thank you. And are those life experiences that you personally are bringing to the Franklin County Municipal Court bench?
I mean, I think I touched on them. Being a child of immigrants gives you a perspective of life that I think is not shared by many. And so, in particular, in Franklin County, especially the municipal court, we are seeing an incredibly heavy docket every day. And a large portion of those cases are people who may not be citizens. And so I think the perspective that I bring with sensitivity to the life challenges of somebody who may be an immigrant, maybe a second generation American, may not speak English, the tolerance is much higher. And the drive to make sure that my courtroom would be equitable across the board for everybody, no matter who you are, where you come from, is definitely rooted in that family history and the experience that I bring as far as that's concerned. I also think that my trial skills, my knowledge of the legal system is unmatched as far as a lot of these races are concerned. I have been in the Franklin County courthouses every single day of my career for almost a decade now. I don't know that there's been a day where I haven't either been physically in the courthouses themselves or working with people in the courthouses on Franklin County cases. So I have been serving Franklin County residents, in particular our most vulnerable residents, for almost a decade now. And I can tell you that experience has not only given me an appreciation for things like the rules of evidence, the way that a courtroom should run, but also in my opinion, some of the more important things, which is making sure that as a judge, you are affording every opportunity in an unbiased and equal fashion to everybody who is in front of you, whether they are a victim, whether they're a defendant, whether they're a civil litigant or an attorney. No one person is better than another, and everybody's voices deserve to be heard in an equal manner.
Great, thank you. Everyone running for judge is an attorney with at least 5 years experience, and a lot of people have very strong legal resumes. Even some are even currently on the bench. So, and some have served as judges of different courts. And this is your first time running, and it seems you're running against someone like that. So what makes you unique? Why should people choose you over someone who can argue that I have the experience, I'm already doing the job?
I think that what makes me unique is that I have been serving the residents of this county, really serving the residents of this county for almost a decade now, every single day. I think that it's easy for a judge who may not have come from the defense side or may not have any experience in the defense side to take things like incarceration lightly. I think that somebody who comes from the defense side, especially the indigent defense side, sees the humanity in every single person that is coming before them in the courtroom. We see the collateral consequences. We see the needs of the community. And so if I were to be elected, not only do I know how a courtroom should work because I've spent every single day of my career in the courtrooms. So I've built that legal experience and I've built that legal knowledge, but I've built that human knowledge, which is equally as important, especially in a place like Franklin County Municipal Court, which is truly the people's court. If somebody's likely to show up in any of the Franklin County courthouses, they are 90% going to be in the Franklin County Municipal Courthouse for a misdemeanor. Very few of our residents are ending up in the felony courthouse. And so being that I have willingly, and I've chosen this, is to spend my career for almost a decade now, spending time with the most underserved of our communities, I think has given me the human perspective to be able to serve on the bench of the People's Court in a better manner than any opponent that I could have. I think that would be my answer.
Thank you. And talking about the underserved, part of the things that you've done before getting here is that you testified before the General Assembly to, for on issues or laws that could impact the underserved. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So that's another aspect of our office, the Public Defender's Office, in particular, our Common Pleas Unit. A few of us have taken it upon ourselves to kind of create a legislation committee, we'll call it. And so we keep an eye on legislation that is going through the General Assembly that could either be harmful or helpful to our clients, being that our clients are members of the most underserved communities that we have here in Central Ohio. So we keep track of this legislation, and anything that we think would be harmful to the members of our community, that the communities that we serve, we take it upon ourselves to show up to the General Assembly. We either write in testimony or we write in and provide oral testimony in the hearings in the different committees where these legislation pieces are being heard. The most recent one that I testified against, and it's public, is the Stand Your Ground law. Again, as a judicial candidate, I can't speak as to my personal feelings to that, where I sit, but what I can tell you is that's the most recent piece of legislation that we spoke on, and the reasoning behind that was merely that it has a very real racial undertone to it. Studies have shown that laws like Stand Your Ground have impacts on communities of color more so than they do of other communities, and so bills like that, we do take it upon ourselves to testify for or against, whether they're helpful or harmful, because not only does our representation exist within the courtroom, but we like to take our representation out of the courtroom, and that's on our own time. That's just something that we do to further serve our clients, because we think that it starts with where the laws are being made. We're existing within the realm of the laws that have already been created.
Correct. Yes. You mentioned that you are a second generation Greek American.
Yes.
And you came from a bilingual home. How has this rich foundational background affected you personally and professionally? And do you believe that it will help you as a judge?
Yeah, I absolutely think it would help me as a judge. In my life, it's impacted me because it has given me a wider lens on the way that people live, where they come from. I didn't have a very narrow perspective growing up on the way that the world works. I was very fortunate to come from a city. It was a suburb of Youngstown, to come from a very diverse city. So we had people that I grew up with whose parents were also immigrants. We had people who I grew up with who spoke other languages, who were immigrants themselves, who were members of underserved communities. And so I was able to take my perspective as a second generation American, take in the perspectives of the peers around me. And I was able to further that perspective when I went to the Ohio State University, because we know it's one of the largest universities in the country, and it is incredibly diverse. Columbus as a city is incredibly diverse. The work that I have done with volunteerism, with public service, has translated very seamlessly to the work that I do as a public defender, and my experiences in an ethnic household that have given me a very wide perspective of the ways in which people live, the ways in which people grew up. Really, it all comes together to enable me to have a perspective that is much wider than that of somebody who maybe did not grow up in that way. And that's not to say that if you did not grow up in a diverse or ethnic household, that you're wrong, or that if you did, you're right. But I think that what perspective it gives is that everybody is experiencing struggle in their own way. Everybody is experiencing life in different ways. It's not just one, monochromatic, monolithic way of living. And as somebody who will hopefully be serving on the Franklin County Municipal Court bench, I think that perspective of understanding the differences of the people around you is going to be key in order to help create equity in the courtroom.
Thank you. What do you want people to think about or to remember you for when they see your name, either on the poster or they come across your name on the ballot?
What I pride myself in the most is that I am dedicated to public service in this county and beyond. My public service record extends from the time I was a young child because it's rooted in volunteerism, in servitude to others. And so that's what I want people to know about me, is I'm not just doing this to get the title of judge. I'm not doing this to, get any type of notoriety. The things that I do with regard to serving on boards or volunteering in different aspects or different organizations didn't just start because I started running for judge this year. This has been something that has been consistent in my life since I was a child, and it's because it was instilled in me from my family. So I want people to know that I'm doing this to take my level of servitude to the residents of Franklin County just to a greater level. I believe that I can have a greater impact on preserving equity within the court system in a much greater way than I can as an attorney.
Thank you. And how can people reach out to you?
Sure. So people can find me on Facebook, on Instagram. Rena Shak for Judge is our name. It's renashakforjudge.com if you want to look at my website. And on email, it's renashakforjudge@gmail.com. So it's really seamless throughout all platforms. If you just Google Rena Shak for Judge, you'll find every avenue to contact us.
Thank you. And if you're listening to this, Rena is spelled Rena and Shak is Shak. Thank you, Rena, for coming onto Legal Angle. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Any platform that public defenders can talk about what we do and give the public a little bit more clarity as to how much we care about what we do is phenomenal. So I just appreciate you giving me that platform.
Thank you for coming. And for those of you watching us or watching this show or listening to us at home, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe.